time for kids. It's back to the boardroom for board directors. Delighted to have Lucy Marcus back with me. Very good to see you, Lucy. Now, this is an opportunity for us to take stock as well of what you've been doing over the summer. You've been racing around the world, talking to directors. What have they learned and what are they taking back to the boardroom with them?
Well, it's been an interesting summer. Usually summers are fairly quiet, but I've spent a lot of time this summer in boardrooms with boards, with board chairs, strategizing, thinking about what they need to do next. So, all boards need to go through a sort of education process. Mm-hmm. They, need to re-educate, particularly now when things are changing so much. So, we're talking about a variety of things.
Well, I mean, let's face it. A lot has happened, as you say. The economic crisis continues. We've had the shareholder spring. Do you get a sense that they've actually learned lessons and they're going to be different when they re-enter the boardroom?
I think they're trying. I think they get.
Is that enough?
Well, it's got to start somewhere. I mean, they're trying, and they're trying to get a grasp of what does this mean for them? What does it mean for their boards? And so that's one of the things that I'm talking to them about. We're talking about agenda items. Are you talking about the right things in the boardroom? We're talking about who's sitting around the board table. It's a really hard conversation to have, actually.
It's also slightly worrying, if you don't mind my saying, that people like yourself have to go in, sit with these people, hold their hands almost, and say, look, this is what you need to be doing. These are the guys are sitting on the boards of these big companies who are making the big decisions.
I think you're being a bit tough. I mean, every single board has to go through a process of re-examination, education, keeping up to speed. You want them to do that. I mean, and look, one of the reasons that it's easier for me is I'm a board director too. I'm sitting down with them and saying, I'm talking to other boards. Here's what everybody is talking about. I write the column for Reuters, of course.
Do you feel, okay, let me put it this way. Do you feel optimistic when you speak to these people, having talked to them about shareholder springs, about economic crises, about the need for further education?
I do, for the most part. I mean, first of all, well, I do because, first of all, we're having the conversation. That's a start, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Everything has to start somewhere. The other thing is they really do want to know, and also it helps to have a third party come in and talk about what's happening and sort of put the focus less on the board having the conversation and more about being frank about asking the question, do you have the right people around the table with the right skills? Are you talking about the right agenda items? I mean, for all of us as directors, it is very difficult sometimes to pull back from, this space that we spend together and be self-critical. So, I mean, I actually think it's a healthy sign that I'm in there having these
conversations. Have you met, of course you don't have to name names, and I'm sure you won't, but are there any people that you've met you think, no hopes, they've got to go?
Of course. I mean, one of the interesting things is one of the biggest issues that boards are having to a certain extent is deadwood directors. Yeah. People who are sitting around the table who, are putting in the time, or they're not doing the reading, they're not contributing, and that's one of the most difficult conversations to have. I mean, how do you say to someone, we had you on this board because you had a certain skill, but we don't need that, and we need the space for somebody else?
Well, let's talk a little bit more about education. It's something you and I have talked about before, but what are they most in need of, these directors, would you say, in terms of education?
I think there are a couple of things. Part of it is understanding how the governance world is changing, what the expectations are, what they need to do and what they need to be thinking about in the boardroom that's different than in the past. They need to understand the impact of things like social media. They need to understand how to use it. They need to understand how they are more and more personally liable for the things that they're talking about and doing in the boardroom. And that's a bit scary for all of us as directors.
And do they feel they're being more closely watched as well now?
Yes, I think we
are. And that's a good thing?
I don't think everybody thinks that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
Does it make them paranoid?
Not paranoid, but it's certainly, for me, when I write my column, partially it's a letter to myself to remind myself what I need to be doing in the boardroom. Because when you're in there, one of the things I've talked about and written about is being tone deaf in a soundproof room. And it is a very, you get this sense when you walk in the room that even though you know the right thing, the door closes, you're talking to each other, and it's almost like breathing in a bag. At first it feels great, and then it makes you sick. Yeah. And it can be toxic. And I think part of what needs to happen is we need to open the doors, open our minds, open ourselves to new ways of thinking, and being self-critical, and also being more open and honest with one another around the room.
Do you imagine you will ever be writing that story for Reuters that says they've got it? we have reached a point now that we needed to reach, and we can move on from here with a big tick in that box?
I think that,
how far away is that story?
Well, I think governance and boards and leadership, everything's moving all the time. We've got the financial crisis. It brings certain challenges. When things are getting better, that will bring certain challenges. The object actually is, and particularly some of the people that I've been interviewing for in the boardroom with Lucy Marcus, I'm talking to people who are creating change, and it's a process. And I think there are people who are championing that change, and we like to celebrate and recognize. There's a lot of people we can learn stuff from, which is the point of the show as well. And then there are things that we can learn from other people's mistakes and hopefully do better.
Okay, Lucy, thank you very much indeed. That was In the Boardroom with Lucy Marcus. We're clearly not in a boardroom. We will be again soon, though. That's it from me. I'm Axel Threlfall. This is Reuters.